1968 AMC Rambler Rogue. Pretty cool little 4-speed car. Reminds me of the Chevy 2 of the same era, probably the competing car for that. Pretty cool dash. I like the spinners. American Motors AMC 390 with Offenhauser finned aluminum covers. Nice. But those are hard to come by. Power steering, power brakes. Pretty cool ride, man. Today we're going to put some gears in the back and add a posi. So let's get this thing up in the air and get to work. Side pipes are slick, man. I didn't even see the headliner. That's pretty cool. Same front suspension as the 79 AMX. Keep it simple, I guess. Yep, camber adjustments right there. Can actually make caster adjustments there. Yeah, solid car. Especially for an AMC from the 60s. AMC Model 20. Actually has a ring and pinion that's bigger than a Ford 9-inch. So these are pretty durable. Let's get the wheels off, get the cover off, and get rid of the one wheel peel on this guy. Ooh. I wonder if I'm going to need axle seals and axle bearings. Maybe not. Maybe we'll get lucky.
Nasty.
Gross. Man, it's been a minute since I've done an AMC. Let's go ahead and mark our caps. And let's let that drain for a minute. We'll get our hubs popped off, hopefully. And then we will pull our axle shafts out. And I left the other ring and pinion up in the trunk, so I need to get those out. Well, it's time to take this new to us Posi apart. We got a used with clean wear ring and pinion, which honestly is probably a nicer ring and pinion than what we can buy for this car right now. So we're going to give it a go. Hopefully it'll be quiet when we're done. Looks like some 13s. Let's take it apart. What friction material? Oh, it's the wrong kits. Son of a biscuit. Alright, so this housing and this housing are indexed. They only go together one way. It actually has the crossbar supported in the V-block on one, and the next one it's supported on the V-block on the other side. So that threw me off putting that back together a little bit. I didn't pay attention taking it apart, but it only goes together one way. These are offset. So, got that back together. I have the wrong clutches. The correct clutch pack for this is $250. So I'm gonna have to order that, which means we're gonna put this car back together. We were trying to go to a little bit taller gear. Ooh, that's got some backlash in her. We're trying to go to a little taller gear because this is a 4-speed car. It's mostly cruised. So, but I'm having a hard time getting my flanges off, and we don't have the right clutches for the Posi, so I'm going to make the call to put this thing back together, and we will attack it on another day. Sometimes that happens, and you have to just say, well, that sucks, and you get back to work. So I'm going to put this thing back together real quick. Pull it outside because I have another car I need to do rear axle seals on, and it needs to be done by the end of the day. So I'm going to move on to that. At least maybe I can get that done today. This is an awesome little car, man. I bet this thing's fun to rip around in. Austin's actually on his way down over to West Jeff to pick up a special tool that's an AMC specific tool for pulling the hub flanges off. I can pull the axles out differently, but I'm going to be lazy and wait for Austin to get back with a special tool so that I can do it the easy way. And I have other work to do, so I'm going to move on to that, and then I will be back onto this, which is probably where you'll go next, like right now. Alright. And we're back. So normally, this being an AMC with all of its uniqueness, normally to remove this hub flange you would use this specialty tool. Bolts on here somehow. At least it's supposed to fit. Oop, now I've gone and done it. Apparently been modified for dual pattern. Multiple patterns. Anyway, you bolt it down with all 5 lugs and you put this in here, you wag it with a hammer until the flange comes off with the nut loose, of course. But our customer requested we not remove the flanges from the axles because he's of the belief that they never go back on correctly. And I'll take his word for it because he's done more AMC rear ends than I have. So we're just gonna take the nuts off and pull the axle out without removing the hub flange. It takes a little more time, but technically I guess it probably takes less time than messing with this thing. So let's get after it and get these axles out. Alright, so to do this efficiently, we're going to remove the brakes. Probably don't have to pull the brakes to do this, but you do have to pull the park brake cable. because the vacuum plate comes off with the axle. So you might as well just get the brakes out of your way. We have a Mazda Speed 3 in here. We're putting an engine in because the owner and his son spent the whole summer building the car. It's actually a pretty nice car. They drove it down the road, 200 feet down the road. It quit running. It bent every valve in the engine because it came apart. So the owner threw up the white flag and just said, we're going to put a long block in it. So we said, okay, we can do that. So let me get these 4 nuts off of here for our axle retainers. Just take a minute. What are you, hawk tawing over there?
Yep. It's fine. I'm getting better.
Alright, so we got my shoes off, I've got my 4 nuts off. I've got my park brake cable out. I'm going to disconnect my wheel cylinder. And then I'm going to put a vacuum cap on the brake line so it doesn't leak brake fluid all over the place. Sometimes you gotta be mean to it. This has a captured bearing along with the backing plate and then the axle seal and the axle retainer are all captured in front of the backing plate. So we'll let this sit and drip grease everywhere over there. Cap on there, so now I can go up, I can pull my diff cover, pull my yoke, pull my center section, and pull my pinion out of the differential. Don't have any shims on this side. Looks like I have 3 shims on the other side. We will put those back in. Alright, so I'm changing my bearings out. I've already transferred the ring gear that he wants installed over to the carrier. I use the old bolts to install it, and I'll pull these bolts out. I'll install the new bolts. These carrier bolts are a one-time use item. You can see there's knurls on there, and those help lock the bolts into place. So you only really, if you can help it, you only want to use these once. The Posi needs rebuilt, so I'm going to get my bearings pulled here real quick. And then I'll pull our, where we go, that guy. Ooh, it's a mess. Let me get able to use both hands. Take one of these apart, you have to pay attention to where the alignments are. The bolts only go in one way. You've got one of the spreader bars on this V block and the other spreader bars on that V block. And actually actually, you probably don't have any little mark on that. Have a grease pen handy. And they're only reused because I had it apart yesterday. You don't actually use clutches, it's just steel plates. You can see these are pretty heated. We've got a cone washer on top. We've got an inside, an outside, an inside, and an outside. I guess that would act as an inside. That makes sense. The other side should be the same. Spider. Block out. Another spider. Yes, there are. Those are in incorrectly, so I'm guessing this is the part. That guy's pretty cooked. Picked up a Spicer kit, 22233X, which looks like it might be the right bits. And it is, so that's a win. So we need a cone. Flat, and an internal, the other piece that I'm looking for, that one, and there's that one, and there's this guy. So all the literature I'm finding, I'm going to reuse the thin washer that was in there. We're going to use our cone washer. I lube these up with some gear oil. We've got a spline washer, and a tab washer, spline washer, a tab washer. We're going to try that, see how that works. Hopefully it's what we need. Oh, now I gotta figure out where I'm supposed to be. It's either that way or that way. We'll try that way first. Oh, must be wrong. That's better. Now we got to compress that down, torque our bolts down evenly. Alright. I don't think we are going to work that way. You can actually see we didn't close our gap. So the new washers are too thick for this. So I'm going to take out the flat washer and see if that solves our problem. After torquing those all down, I've still got an air gap. So that clutch kit is apparently incorrect, even though the cross references for it. We'll figure out what we're going to do with that. Those are the same thickness. The stators are 196. 195. Sorry, 0.95, 0.95. 5. So that's weird. What am I doing wrong? I'm doing something wrong. Gotta be something I'm doing. Well, this center differential is kind of fighting me, and I want to make sure I put it together correctly. It doesn't appear to be going together correctly for me, so we're going to try and find a unit repair manual so that I can make sure I'm doing my due diligence, doing it correctly. I'm going to go ahead and go back to this Mustang, because I might be able to get that done before I have to leave today to go up and visit my daughter at campus. So I'm going to move back over to that turbocharger that the Mustang was built around, and see if I can get it, get the bump steer installed on it, and get the final bump steer adjustment, toe adjustment in it. I've already got the caster and camber set on it, so let's see if we can make some headway and deliver that so they can go to testing tube tonight. This car is unfortunately not going to the AMC meet that it was supposed to be going to, because I failed to get it done. I apologize, sometimes I can't do it all. So I'm gonna move on to other things. Problem with using used parts is you end up with stuff you have to resolve. It's not real bad, but my pinion nut, there's some indentations on the end. Somebody probably removed this with a hammer, and my nut gets really super tight. So I'm going to try and clean up the threads on here. I didn't have a proper fine thread chaser for it. Unfortunately, it's bigger than the ones I have in my kit, at least for my standards for fine thread. So I'll try and use a thread file to clean it up a little bit. I've got my housing back together. I'm gonna have to put it in the axle and try and, I didn't have any stub shafts to align my my splines in there, so I'll have to try and manipulate it when it's up back on the car. So little things to overcome. Had a busy week, a lot going on. I don't know if you can see that distortion there. Luckily it's just right on the end. I'm not having any luck with the thread file because this is super hard. I'm probably just going to grind that first thread off to get exposure past where it's dinged down in. So you can actually see where it's really making the threads shiny in there, maybe. I don't know if you can see it or not. I only took it on a couple threads just to see where the witnesses are. But it's super tight, and then it's like a lock nut before it's even engaged, and it really should only be locking up top. I'm afraid if I just run that down, it'll create metal shavings in there, and then when I go to take it off, it'll gall and destroy the pinion, and these pinions are not available. So I think the right course of action is to just grind the edge back at a 45 degree until I'm past the damaged threads. But that's one of the things you run into when you're dealing with parts that are not available. You have to use what you have, and you have to fix whatever's damaged. I'm trying to remove as little as possible. Still have a distortion there. Focus my sander right there on that spot just to see if I can eliminate it. It's looking pretty good. We're right at about 7 thousandths backlash. Should be perfect. I'm going to add a little thicker shim on this side. I need a little more preload, which may open that backlash up a little, and that's okay. This ring gear's already worn in, so if I set it up at 8 thou, it's going to stay at 8 thou. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to run a pattern. My pinion depth should be good because I'm using the same shim as what the axle was set up with. The pinion is if I remember right, it was a +5, and the other pinion was a +2, so they would be within 3 thousandths of where it needs to be. So I think that's acceptable, especially being a used ring gear. There's no way I can guarantee this thing's gonna not make noise because I don't know what it did before, but the pattern looks good, so I think we'll be okay. We overcame the thread damage, and we still have good contact on our threads up here, so that's good. You can maybe see that. I don't know if it's whitewashed or not. But I ground the first couple threads off, and I still have contact, and I still have engagement with my lock portion of the nut, which is good. So, making headway. Seventh thou, exactly. I'll take it. That'll work. Alright, so I should be going together from the last time. New seal, new crush sleeve. I'm going to put the yoke on with the old nut, and then I'll pull it off. And then I'll install the new nut. But I only like to use the new nut one time. I don't want to wear out the mechanical locking portion of it. So I use the old nut as many times as possible, and then I only use the new nut once. But it's looking pretty good. Crush that down. And then we put in our center section, our posi. And then it will be time to put our axles back in. So moving right along, making headway. Hopefully have this thing wrapped up tonight. Feels about right. Hello. Let's put this bad boy back together. Get it out on the streets. Well, after it stops raining in like 3 days. torqued, pinion nuts on, drive shafts in. Time to stab some axles in this, which is going to be a challenge, but we should be able to overcome it. Let's see what we end up with. So these AMC axles are kind of unique. They have an inner seal here, which is to keep the gear lube away from the axle bearings. Same over here, and those seals are pretty horrible. Basically the gear lube only lubricates the center section, and then the axle bearings are just a tapered bearing with a race, and they're packed with grease, and they're sealed away from the gear oil, and then there's a seal on the outside as well. But you can't replace the outside seal without replacing the bearing and collet. I think there's a collet on there as well, if I remember correctly. So that presses onto the axle shaft, and I did get some new inner seals because I figured they'd be horrible, and they are. So we're going to replace the inners. We're going to reuse the outers because all they have to do is seal against bearing grease. We'll pack that bearing full of axle grease and put it back together. Gross. Let's get a seal installer that'll work on that guy. Well, I'm feeling defeated. I've been messing with this rear end for several hours today, and I'm going to go home and take a break. So this problem, there's multiple problems with this situation. So this differential from the factory, they literally say, do not rebuild these, replace these. Part of the reason for that is they have jigs that they assemble them with that get all the parts inside there lined up, so when you go to put your drive shafts in, they slide into them, whereas I'm having a problem that I can't get my axle shafts to go into the two pieces. So that's a problem. And then there's, these are a two-piece axle. The axle shaft has a flange. It's a tapered shaft with a keyway. There's really no reason you shouldn't be able to remove it and reinstall it, but the owner doesn't want the flanges removed, which makes installation of these way more complicated. Actually, you have to pull the flange off to service the bearing. The bearing services from the front. That's how these work. I was trying to remember that from before, and a lot of the newer stuff you put on the axle bearing, and then you put a collet on after the axle bearing to lock it in place. These don't have that because they are a two-piece axle shaft. So anyway, I'm gonna go home. My hands hurt. It's Friday night. It's been raining all day. It's a miserable day. Hopefully you guys are having more success in your garage than I am in mine. But I'm gonna take a break, walk away from it, and come back to it tomorrow, because that's all you can do when you get frustrated. You need to walk away from it, take a break, have a cold beverage, whatever it is you do. Smoke them if you got them. I don't know. Everybody vapes these days. I don't know about vaping. That seems like a bad idea. Anyway, we'll get back to this tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be less frustrated. You guys will see me before I see you. I bet my Posi will work now too. Oh, sometimes I do dumb things. Let's start over. I need to torque those. And then I'll pull it all apart. Put my shims in. Get my backlash where it needs to be. And then I should be able to put the axles in for the last time. Alright, so it's time to take my axle shafts out. Drop my housing, torque my housing bolts. Get my backlash shimmed correctly. And put it all back together. It's one of those situations where my brain wasn't working right and I made some mistakes and had to take it back apart and put it back together again. So That's on me. It is what it is. Sometimes I make mistakes. Move on, fix it, do it again. Get it done. Thing's got some rowdy exhaust on her. Alright, well, by using the axle as a jig, I was able to get everything, hopefully, everything was all aligned up inside that differential. We'll know here in a second when I go to pull these out. Slide hammer that. That's better. It's much better. Missed it entirely again. I'm getting tired. Beep, beep, beep. That's gonna be so much fun to drive to Jegs and back. You're gonna have so much fun in that.
I'm really looking forward to the test drive. I feel like I don't get the test drive any of the fun ones. I need my step stool just to get in and out of this goddamn car. Rich is like, oh look, finished the race car. Here I'm gonna go blast this down the road a couple times. Make sure it's okay. Nope, here's an 18-ton work truck that stops like a fucking barge. Great. It's covered in church shit. There's a
Jeff's over here working on a lifted monster that came down with so much tow and camber that it was darting from side to side when he was driving it. I'm surprised he drove here in 8 degrees of positive camber. Oh, it's bad.
There's an interesting line from underneath this truck. So I'm making sure, because to me that sounds like a high pressure, sounds like a race car fuel pump.
Got some oil leaks.
So I'm sure it's leaking everywhere. Wet light.
Got brand new brakes on it. It does sound like he's got an electric fuel pump running, but
Yeah.
oh golly. Nah, it's a fuel pump. Okay. It's the lift pump.
Yeah. It's a really loud pump.
Good Lord, what is all over this thing? Well, this isn't the one that was here for the rear. Oh, that's dripping on me. That's nice. Little urea in my hair. That's gonna be lovely.
Yeah, this is not the one that's here for the rear end.
A brand new drive shaft in it. How'd they tear the drive shaft up?
Can you hear that other resonance?
Yeah. That's probably the SCR. Oh, golly. Oh. Cleater's flying around in toys, and I got to work on this garbage. Proud of him, though.
Should have quit law school like he did.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm not gonna get stranded probably.
Yeah, sure.
If I do, don't call you.
If you do, I'm going home early.
And you couldn't tow this anyway.
I can't. We'd have to get a big wrecker. Yeah, this is a 550, so I can't tow that with anything I have. Yeah.
Okay.
Got any tree work you need to do?
Not near here.
so much better than it did the last time. I'm a dummy sometimes. These bolts are torqued. Side carrier bolts are torqued. Backlash is good. I had it all apart. I had it all back together. Now I get to take it apart again because the Posi acts like a welded rear diff and there's no give in it. So let's take it back apart again. Fun stuff. It's working on old cars. Well, I've had a pretty good run, but I failed on this one. I'm going to take this Posi back apart.
After 6 with Kelly Pinion. Be sure to subscribe to the one. Snow, all that. Don't you go off the QC if you want to see good mobility without surgery, without 480208085 5-star review, and that includes me.
Figure out what I did wrong.
Customer service. But you need to hurry. The sale ends October 31st. Act now before it's gone. Don't wait more than you have before for quality windows. Schedule your fast in-home estimate.
I knew I did something wrong, but I didn't know what it was, and I just figured it out. 2 of these flat washers are thinner than the rest. That was my problem. So I had too much shim. That makes sense. It makes complete sense. I know what I'm doing. See how that happens. 95. These 2 are only 60. So I had an extra 35. I had an extra 70 thou thickness in there. So let's put this together with the new parts and the 2 selective washers, and I bet my Posi will work now. That was the dumbest thing I have done in a long time. Alright. You're not making mistakes, you're not trying to learn new things, I guess. Alright, so I messed up, and that happens when you're trying things that you haven't done in a while. So I probably haven't had an AMC axle apart in 15 years or more. And I've never done anything with one of these differentials. So I learned that, you know, there's 2 selective washers in there for the thickness of how this piece is machined, and so I put all the new shims in minus the 2 selective shims that were in it. I put the housing in, or I put the carrier into the housing without any side shims, and I loosened up all my bolts to take the pressure off so that I have an open differential, because the pressure cone and the spider gear have to be in alignment, and it needs to be straight, and when you tighten this housing down, it pivots and bends and twists, and it pushes all that stuff out of alignment. So I gotta put my other axle shaft in this side so that I know everything's in alignment and held together correctly, and then I can tighten all these down, and then I should be able to pull the axles out, put the axle back in, and my limited slip should operate correctly. So, a lot of extra work because I knew something was wrong and I couldn't wrap my head around what I was doing incorrectly. I took it all back apart and I figured it out. So, let's see if we can fix it. Oh, that is a real pain to do with the hats on these axles. These, the hub flange is cut by the axle when it's installed at the factory, so if you do remove the hub, you have to keep it with that axle. So I'm assuming that some people believe these don't go back together correctly, but maybe they mixed up the hat with a different axle. But the flange doesn't have any splines in it. It does have a keyway at the factory, and then when they installed it at the factory, the splines were cut into the hub flange by the axle. So if you remove it, you have to put it back on the same axle. Basically a manufactured fit. Oh God, Children of the Corn, that was
Yeah, the first.
that what like the original Children of the Corn in the 70s. My dad knew one of the people that was on that project, and he took us, my sister and I, to Children of the Corn for the premiere. And I don't think I made it 5 minutes. I was scarred. Like, I still can't watch that movie. And I've turned it on and I'm like, okay, it's really not that bad, but I still can't watch it. As a kid, and they're like, oh, we're so sorry your kids didn't like it. We thought it was a family movie. And I'm like, what?
Oh, Malachi.
Oh my God. Children of the Corn. I was like 6. So this side took a little extra time. The wheel cylinder on the other side's already been replaced. This one was leaking, and none of them are available here in short form. So I just took it apart, cleaned everything up, put it all back together, and it will probably be okay. But then, now it's time to put this thing back together. So, let's finish this job and get it done. This one was a little bit challenging, but we are going to overcome. You can't fail if you never quit, as Austin says. Alright, let's go for a test drive. Alright, well, I finally got some satisfaction on this car. It fought me a wee bit. That's okay, that happens sometimes. Sometimes it's a battle. This little Rebel Rogue with a 390 and a 4-speed's a super cool car. Probably not something I'll ever see again. Drove really nice. The rear end's tight. The rear end doesn't make any abnormal noises, so the used gear set that he supplied me with appears to be a decent unit. I mean, it's a factory unit, so at least they got that going for them. Super cool car. This thing actually has a very cool dash. Auxiliary gauges, but that gauge cluster is actually very sexy. Pretty cool car, man. Sorry it took so long for me to get it done, but sometimes you just have to fight the fight. Sometimes you're fighting yourself. Nope, squeaky belt, just like Austin's car. Sometimes you fight the fight, sometimes you're fighting yourself, sometimes you're fighting parts. This one was a mixture of a few different issues, but I overcame it and it's all better now. This is a fun little car, man. Go out and enjoy it. Drive the snot out of this thing. It sounds amazing. Rebel Rogue. It does need some suspension work. The steering wheel's like off like 40 degrees. But maybe he'll let me work on that next time. Hopefully I'll have less troubles with that. Cool little car. I honestly can't imagine. Is like body matched to the panel in the back, which is super cool. Wonder how hard those things are to find. Pretty cool. Cool old car, guys. Thanks for bringing it to me and letting me work on it. Sorry it took so long. But on to the next thing. You guys have a great day. Stay safe out there. We'll see you on the next one.